Something big is about to happen inside the PGA Tour, and almost nobody saw this coming. Welcome back to PGA Updates Hub, where we break down the biggest stories shaping the future of professional golf. Today, we are talking about a moment that has the entire golf world buzzing, because one of the biggest stars in the sport just stood up and said something nobody expected him to say. Something big is about to happen inside the PGA Tour, and almost nobody saw this coming. Welcome back to PGA Updates Hub, where we break down the biggest stories shaping the future of professional golf. Today we are talking about a moment that has the entire golf world buzzing because one of the biggest stars in the sport just stood up and said something nobody expected him to say. Speaking ahead of this year's US Open, Rory was asked about the tour's future plans, and instead of simply nodding along, he raised a red flag that caught everyone off guard. He didn't attack LIV Golf, and he didn't throw shade at any rival player. Instead, he turned his attention inward and questioned whether the PGA Tour might be solving a problem that doesn't even exist anymore. Think about how wild that sounds for a second. After years of non-stop talk about reinventing professional golf, one of its most respected voices is now suggesting the old setup may have worked just fine all along. So what exactly is this new plan that has everyone talking? According to people familiar with the discussions, the PGA Tour is considering splitting its schedule into two separate tiers. The first tier would house the elite of the elite. Think somewhere between 12 and 16 marquee events combined with the 4 major championships, the Players' Championship, the FedEx Cup playoffs, and international showcases like the Ryder Cup and President's Cup. This top tier would essentially become the new home for golf's biggest names, playing in front of the biggest crowds for the biggest paychecks. Then comes Tier 2, and this is where things start getting complicated. Tier 2 would function almost like a stepping stone tour. Players would grind through these events hoping to climb up into Tier 1, similar to how promotion and relegation works in other global sports leagues. On paper, it almost sounds organized and fair. But Rory sees a much bigger problem hiding underneath the surface. He worries that once a tournament gets dropped into Tier 2, it instantly gets stamped as a lesser event. And once that label sticks, it becomes incredibly hard to remove. He didn't hold back either, and compared the proposed second tier to little more than a feeder tour stop rather than a genuine PGA Tour event. That single remark sent shockwaves through the golf community because it forces fans and insiders to ask an uncomfortable question. If tournaments get pushed down into this lower bracket, what actually happens to their reputation moving forward? And this isn't just about prestige on paper. It is about real history. Take the RBC Canadian Open as an example. This is one of the oldest running tournaments in the entire sport, a national championship loaded with decades of tradition and meaning. Yet under the new proposed structure, an event like this could realistically get bumped into the lower tier simply because of where it falls in the new ranking system. Rory made it clear he doesn't believe a tournament with that kind of legacy should ever be treated as secondary. And this isn't just about prestige on paper. It is about real history. Take the RBC Canadian Open as an example. This is one of the oldest running tournaments in the entire sport, a national championship loaded with decades of tradition and meaning. Yet under the new proposed structure, an event like this could realistically get bumped into the lower tier simply because of where it falls in the new ranking system. Rory made it clear he doesn't believe a tournament with that kind of legacy should ever be treated as secondary. His worry boils down to something simple yet powerful. Once fans, players, and sponsors start viewing an event as second tier, that perception rarely reverses itself. Trust takes years to build, but only moments to damage. And if some of golf's most historic tournaments end up paying the price for a structural experiment that raises a massive question about whether this entire plan was thought through properly, this isn't a small concern either. Tournaments like the Canadian Open rely heavily on sponsorship dollars and broadcast deals that are often tied directly to perceived status within the tour. If a title sponsor senses their event has been quietly downgraded, they may start asking tough questions about renewing their commitment. Local organizing committees who have spent decades building community support around these tournaments could suddenly find themselves fighting an uphill battle just to maintain the same level of attention they once had. Once that kind of momentum slows down, it rarely speeds back up overnight. And that is exactly the scenario Rory seems to be worried about. To understand why the PGA Tour is even considering this kind of overhaul, we need to rewind back to 2022. That was the year LIV Golf burst onto the scene and completely rattled the sport. Massive contracts flooded in, huge guaranteed paydays lured away some of the game's biggest stars. The PGA Tour suddenly found itself fighting just to hold on to its own talent pool. In response, leadership moved fast. Prize money exploded across the board. New signature events were introduced almost overnight. Every decision seemed built around one single goal: keep the biggest names locked inside the PGA Tour ecosystem before they could even think about leaving. According to Rory, those moves made total sense back then. The tour was under serious pressure and had to react quickly to protect itself. But here is where his argument gets really interesting. He believes the landscape has shifted since those early chaotic days. And if the threat from LIV Golf isn't nearly as intense as it once was, should the PGA Tour really keep operating under the same emergency mindset? That question right there is the heart of this entire debate. Rory isn't necessarily saying the tour's leadership made bad decisions. He's saying the circumstances that justified those decisions may no longer apply in the same way. And if the circumstances have changed, shouldn't the strategy evolve along with them? This conversation could not be arriving at a more important moment. Reports suggest PGA Tour Commissioner Brian Rowlap is expected to deliver a major update very soon, outlining exactly how this new structure might look going forward. For months, a special committee focused on the tour's future has been quietly working behind the scenes, weighing different proposals and gathering feedback. Momentum toward real structural change appears to be building fast. Yet despite all that planning, one massive issue remains completely unresolved. Nobody truly knows how these sweeping changes will impact the tournaments that built the PGA Tour's reputation in the first place. How exactly will players qualify for each tier? How many spots will actually move between tiers each season? Will broadcast partners support this kind of split? Will long-time sponsors stick around if their event gets pushed down a level? Will fans even embrace a system this dramatically different from what they grew up watching? These are the exact questions making golf fans nervous right now, and that nervous energy is exactly why Rory's comments landed with so much force. He basically said out loud what plenty of people inside the sport have likely been thinking quietly for a while. Within hours of Rory's comments going public, golf forums and social media timelines completely lit up. Fans started digging through old interviews trying to figure out exactly when his tone toward the tour's direction started shifting. Analysts jumped on television and radio shows, debating whether his warning should be treated as a minor opinion or as a genuine signal of trouble brewing behind closed doors. Some longtime golf writers pointed out that Rory has historically been one of the more diplomatic voices in the sport, which made this moment feel even more significant. When someone known for choosing his words carefully suddenly speaks this directly, people tend to pay extra attention. And that reaction alone tells you this story isn't fading away anytime soon. And Rory isn't standing alone on this either. Legendary golfer Jack Nicklaus has also voiced concerns, although from a slightly different angle. Nicklaus specifically pointed toward worries about scheduling. He's concerned that cramming too many marquee tournaments into a tight stretch of the calendar could create long-term problems for both players and the events themselves. When a player with 18 major championships starts raising red flags about scheduling, people around the sport tend to listen closely. What makes Rory's perspective even more compelling right now is the fact that he isn't directly involved in shaping these proposals anymore. He isn't sitting in committee rooms helping design this new framework. He's watching everything unfold from the outside, just like the rest of us, which means these comments aren't coming from someone defending their own plan. They're coming from a player simply reacting honestly to what he sees happening around him. Meanwhile, anticipation continues building toward an upcoming policy board vote that many expect to take place before the Travelers' Championship. If that vote moves forward, it could push this entire framework one giant step closer to becoming permanent reality. And that's exactly why this story matters far beyond a single press conference. We're talking about a potential reshaping of professional golf's entire competitive landscape. The decisions made over these next few weeks could influence scheduling, player pathways, tournament prestige, sponsorship deals, and fan engagement for years into the future. So here's the real question nobody can answer just yet. Has the PGA Tour actually found the right balance between embracing innovation and protecting tradition? Or is leadership risking serious damage to the very elements that made the tour successful in the first place? Right now, nobody has a definitive answer, but we are getting closer to finding out with every passing day. Once Brian Rowlap delivers his next major update, we should finally get a clearer picture of where professional golf is truly heading. And based on how strongly the golf world has already reacted to Rory's comments, you can bet that announcement is going to be analyzed from every possible angle. If you found this breakdown valuable, make sure to like this video and subscribe to PGA Updates Hub so you never miss a single update from the world of professional golf. Turn on notifications too, because the next few weeks could bring some of the biggest golf headlines we have seen in years. Drop a comment below and let us know whether you agree with Rory or whether you think the PGA Tour is right to push forward with bold changes. We'll be right here covering every twist and turn as this story continues to develop.